Hi everybody, welcome back. Today I just wanted to do a quick little check-in because we are at the halfway point. This is a 6-week summer course and we are wrapping up week 3, which means we are wrapping up a lot of the intro materials where we've gone through the basics of economics, the basics of scarcity and markets, and sort of diving into those macro ideas like labor markets and financial markets, the macroeconomic perspective where we looked at sort of the measures and the big ideas of macroeconomics, and then starting to dive into our big macroeconomic indicators, things like GDP, unemployment, and inflation. Going forward into week 4, we're going to start to build into our big ideas. And where we're going to end up in this class is looking at our model of aggregate demand and aggregate supply. And really what that is a big model that looks at how we can measure growth and unemployment and inflation and price levels all in one place in one market. And it's going to look a little bit like the market forces of supply and demand, but it's going to be really different because we're going to be talking about the whole economy, measuring GDP and looking at the demand for all the goods and services in our economy and an economy's ability to supply those. And so we're going to start building that with our discussions of things like international trade and exchange rates to understand how a global economy is impacted by those forces. And that'll be in the next couple of chapters. And then we'll really dive into that aggregate demand, aggregate supply model. We're also going to start going really out of order on chapters. And so I just wanted to give a little bit of clarification. It's in the syllabus. It'll be organized on Canvas week by week like it has so far. But just to give you a heads up for the next couple of weeks, let me get this. There we go. In week 4, we're going to look at international trade, capital flows in international trade, and then the flows of financial capital and exchange rates. And that's going to really give us that international perspective, tying all those things together so that we understand how a globalized modern economy is affected by what happens in other countries and how what we do affects how other countries respond to us with respect to imports and exports and interest rates and all that stuff, inflation, how all those things are interconnected. In week 5, that's when we'll finally build our aggregate demand, aggregate supply model. And it's going to use a little bit of everything we've talked about so far. And so this class truly does build on everything you've done so far. So if there's anything you've got questions about, now's a great time to reach back and ask me, or go through your notes or post a question on one of our discussion boards, something like that. We'll use these 3 chapters to build aggregate demand and aggregate supply, and also talk about 2 sort of perspectives, 2 kind of warring sides on how we should view aggregate demand and aggregate supply. And the basic argument is it being driven by our capacity to produce, or is it being driven by the demand for our production, sort of a demand side versus supply side? And we'll dive into that here. And then in week 6, that's our last week. It's going to be a busy week. We're going to have 3 chapters of material and the final exam. This is going to be where we take this model we learn here in week 5 and talk about how we can manage it. This is where we'll talk about fiscal policy and monetary policy. How does the government and the central bank influence and affect our economy? And this is really exciting because this is where we start to talk about the policies that we might hear governments and central banks talk about and their effectiveness. So this is really, really interesting, relevant stuff. And we're going to get the basic bare bones of it so that you can understand all those mechanisms. And I really think about this as like building the machine. Here in the first 4 weeks, we're putting together all the parts so we understand them. Week 5, we put them together to build a machine. And then in week 6, we start pushing on the levers to see what the outcomes will be. We'll have our final exam at the end of week 6. It'll be structured the same way as the midterm exam, multiple choice, short answer, and true-false questions, timed 1 attempt, all on Canvas. But it is going to be a little bit of a busy chapter and a busy week. So that is our plan going forward. If you have questions, you want support, please remember there's all those resources that are posted on Canvas. I am always available via email or through discussion, and I have office hours on Zoom Wednesdays from 9:30 to 10:30. But if those times don't work for you, let me know. I tend to be more available in the mornings, but if there's a time when you'd like to meet, let me know, and we'll see what we can do. That's where we are. That's where we're going, and you're at the halfway point. So if this has been a little stressful, you're almost there. If you are catching up, you've still got some time. Make sure you get as much in as you can. Focus on recent work so you get the most points for it possible. And please, oh please, let me know. Ask me questions, and I'm so happy to answer them. And I hope you're having a great day, and I'll see you next time. Bye.